I remember it like it was yesterday. Christmas Day, 1997. My father had borrowed an issue of GamePro magazine from me in order to get the scoop on the hottest games coming out. That Christmas I received NASCAR 98, Fighting Force, which I have fond memories of playing even if it didn't hold a candle to Streets of Rage, and my first introduction to the Tomb Raider series, Tomb Raider 2. I would later acquire the original Tomb Raider at a rummage sale, and despite the awkwardness of jumping back from Tomb Raider 2 to the original, have since come to appreciate the original as probably the best in the original Tomb Raider series, even if the second one is still my favorite. I've only recently acquired the third and fourth games in the series on the PS1, but I've also owned Chronicles on the PC for years, but have never had a good PC controller with which to play it. So my main experience with the series revolves around the first two games. Brought up in the comfort of the British aristocracy, at 21 years old, Lara's life was forever changed when her plane went down during a skiing trip to the Himalayas. Forced to survive by herself, Lara would walk into a local village 2 weeks later. After her experience, Lara was hooked on adventure, and not even being disowned and cut off by her own family would stop her tomb raiding adventures, which published journals of would bring her fame and fortune. Though the game's manual makes it seem as if Lara had only ever lived a life of comfort and had never been adventuring before, the story would later have a revision of sorts with the addition of young Lara in Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation.
What's a man gotta do to get that kind of attention from you?
It's hard to say exactly, but you seem to be doing fine.
Well,
The opening cinema shows Lara being enticed by a lady named Jacqueline Natla into finding an ancient artifact known as a Scion. An artifact rumored to give immense power to the person who wields it. This, however, is not going to be an easy task, seeing as the Scion has been split into three pieces and spread throughout the ancient world. The game's story is unfolded through the use of CGI cinemas and in-game sequences. Though storylines in 1996 gaming had a minimal focus outside of RPGs, Tomb Raider's story is fairly cinematic compared to the other games released in that time period.
An age-old artifact of mystical power is buried in the unfound tomb of Qualapec. That's my interest. You could leave tomorrow. Are you busy tomorrow?
Lara's quest for the Scion will span 15 levels in 4 locations, which include the ruins of Peru, Greece, Egypt, and ending in the lost city of Atlantis. The game's design is spectacular. The levels, though daunting at first, still show some of the best blending of puzzle and action-based gameplay. Core did an exceptional job in the level designs of this game, and the quality still shines through to this day. I may as well just get it out of the way. The most incessant amount of whining I've ever heard levied against Tomb Raider over the years by its detractors pertains to the game's controls. I'll be the first to admit Lara is insanely hard to control. Her controls mirror games like Resident Evil, where pressing up is the only way to move forward regardless of the camera angle. This tank control scheme, as it has recently been dubbed, has an extremely high learning curve. And her jumping system also has an extremely high learning curve. However, controlling Lara is obviously not impossible, and the game does offer a very well made training mode for new players to get a handle of these controls. One must also take into account that Tomb Raider started development and was released before analog gaming really took off. That being said, 8-way run controls with the D-pad or even analog controls like those found in Mario 64 would not work for this game. You may wonder how I could make a claim like that, but you must keep in mind that all of the levels in Tomb Raider are on a square-based grid. The control is more formulaic in nature to take advantage of a square grid. By using Lara's ability to look around and scoping out the jump in front of you, you can determine if you can make the jump with a simple forward jump, or if you need a running jump. This requires a little bit more discernment on the player's part than the average platformer game does, but Tomb Raider in general requires you to put a lot of thought into everything you do. The difficult controls also combat a problem that plagued 3D games with a third-person view for years: bad camera angles. Tomb Raider does have its share of bad angles, but as I stated previously, you don't actually have to see the jump to make the jump. Lara's ability to look around means you can plot out your jump before you even start moving, with the confidence that you are going to make it, even if you're jumping blind. I'm not excusing bad camera angles, but as an early 3D game, they were still working out the simple mechanics that we take for granted in today's gaming. When jumping in Tomb Raider, it doesn't matter what the camera does because there is only one way to move forward. Even if the camera shifts to a completely different view mid-jump, Lara will still make the jump. The tank controls may not be ideal, but they do have their advantages. The controls themselves also have a bit of an open feel to them. Lara does not automatically grab ledges. You have to manually hold a button in order for her to grab them. This can make the complicated controls feel a bit more complicated, especially if you're used to modern games that automatically grab them for you. I like this aspect though, because it lets me have complete control of everything Lara does. I understand the merits of having characters automatically grab ledges, but it sometimes leads to control issues in games that use it. To let go of a ledge in Tomb Raider, I just let go of the X button and she drops. In many modern games, sometimes just trying to jump to the platform below is made more complicated because the characters usually turn around and grab the ledge. I realize these design measures in modern games are to prevent you from accidentally plummeting to your death from falling off the ledge, which can be a common occurrence in Tomb Raider, but I still prefer to have complete control. The grab feature isn't perfect in Tomb Raider, but it still works great. Due to the square grid, you nearly have to be lined up perfectly with the ledge to grab it. There is some forgiveness for not being perfectly square to the ledge, but the game is still a lot less forgiving about it than most. This can oftentimes lead to Lara plummeting to her death because you are not lined up right with the ledge, and again lead to frustrating backtracking because of the save system. I've been playing Tomb Raider for a little over 17 years now, and yes, even I sometimes fumble over the controls here and there. However, modern control schemes didn't come to us overnight. It took years of refinements and tweaking established control schemes to get where we are today. It also took the release of dual analog controllers, not available at the time of Tomb Raider's release, to finally get a good balance of camera plus movement controls. That being said, this game has an extremely high learning curve when it comes to the controls. It always has. But that's just one of the things one must take into account when going back and playing the original Tomb Raider series. You are forced to learn the tough controls under fire, and the game doesn't let up as soon as you start. If you've been spoiled by the soft touch of analog controls, going back to D-pad controls mean you might literally play this game until your thumb bleeds. Not an attack on the controls, but if you've lost your old school callus, your thumb will be aching. Plus there are many other reasons why you'll be gripping your controller tightly, which I'll get into later. The bad thing about Tomb Raider's level designs are that oftentimes it's not clear what to do or where to go next. This is one of the biggest complaints against the entire series. The game doesn't hold your hand, and you will find yourself getting completely lost and backtracking through an entire level trying to figure out what to do in order to progress. In fact, complaints over this design choice were voiced so loudly and the backlash against it so great that even to this day, developers have completely sterilized their games of tough puzzle elements, making modern puzzle elements in adventure games so easy they not only feel insulting to your intelligence, being so watered down, but they practically show you the solution from the second you enter a room, making you wonder why they even bothered adding the puzzle elements to begin with. But the great thing about Tomb Raider's level designs are that oftentimes it's not clear what to do or where to go next. In other words, the bad thing is the game doesn't hold your hand. But the good thing is the game doesn't hold your hand. I myself have spent countless hours being lost in Tomb Raider, probably more than most of those who levied complaints against the series in its heyday. And while I do agree it is frustrating being absolutely stuck in the game, spending hours upon hours trying to figure out what to do or where to go next, only to have a simple solution pop up, there is something that is still so completely satisfying about finally figuring it out by yourself, without help. It's a tough form of satisfaction that you rarely see in gaming anymore. After years of playing Tomb Raider and learning how to scan and search every inch of a level, I have found that very few games have been able to stump me since. I remember when Uncharted 2 first came out. I had a friend who was stuck on one of the puzzles for like a week. I came over and within 5 minutes solved it for him. I'm not saying that I haven't been stumped since, but because of the complaining, heavy puzzle focus in adventure games is a thing of the past. The exception being games like Zelda. Another complaint I hear is with the puzzle objectives. Yes, there is a lot of key getting, switch throwing, and the term and hatred for block puzzles comes from the backlash against Tomb Raider. When you understand that Tomb Raider has a unique blend of action, adventure, with a heavy puzzle focus, and the puzzle elements have tons of thought put into them, it's not the means of unlocking the objectives that is important, like throwing a switch or moving blocks a certain way. It's the journey in between. Each level is itself a giant puzzle, unlocked through solving smaller puzzles. Core design took a lot of time designing every level in the game. There is no half-hearted puzzle elements in Tomb Raider. They are all well designed and well thought out, and the levels are designed as one big puzzle. Those who would criticize this game for its objectives being simple switch pulling, key gathering, and block puzzles tend to overlook the sheer amount of thought put into the level designs of this game. And Tomb Raider isn't all about the puzzles. The game also shines in its action and adventure elements, which take place within the puzzle elements. As you may expect, in typical Indiana Jones fashion, the ancient ruins are also filled with all sorts of deadly traps, often sprung on you without warning. One can complain that this does lead to many cheap deaths, but the element of surprise adds to the tense atmosphere of the game, and the atmosphere is my favorite part of the game. Each level, aside from having a heavy puzzle focus, is rife with death traps and all sorts of baddies just waiting to pounce on you at any given moment. Some enemies are easy to see and kill from the get-go, but others are scripted to show up as you accomplish objectives in the level. Pulling a switch or grabbing an item is the easy part. It unlocks the next part of the puzzle. However, it also unlocks consequences in the game. Just when you think you're safe, pulling that lever oftentimes brings enemies your way, in areas you thought you had already previously cleared. Or it springs a trap on you. You honestly never know what to expect. Add that to the fact that Lara is completely alone to explore. The game has a sense of tension that rivals games in the survival horror genre. You honestly never know what to expect next, and you rarely feel safe in the game. You're alone, and you're in a hostile environment, with surprises all around you. I've often found myself staring down a hallway in the game, knowing full well that I have to go down that hallway to progress in the game, but telling myself that I don't want to. There's something down there. I know it. A feeling that easily rivals games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill. Sometimes you find yourself holding onto your controller for dear life, which adds to the pain in your D-pad thumb. There are so many unexpected surprises just waiting around every corner, whether it be an enemy lying in wait, or Pierre the Litterbug, who stalks Lara throughout most of the levels in the game, popping in at the most inconvenient times and disappearing just as fast, to, and how could I not mention, one of the most memorable scenes in the game, and one of the most iconic scenes in that whole generation of gaming, the Tyrannosaurus Rex popping in to say hello. The music and sound effects also add to the tension. Lara is usually surrounded in silence with maybe some ambient sounds in the background. You can hear everything in the environments around you, which adds to the lonely feeling in the game. Sometimes you can hear the enemies around you, a growl breaking the silence and causing butt puckering. Yes, I did just say that. As you run to the high ground for safety so you can get a vantage point to see where the sound is coming from. Other times, at selected moments, one of the soothing themes starts to play, and adds almost a sense of wonder as you explore the ancient environments presented in the game. It really does give you a feeling like you're the first person to see these environments in thousands of years. However, generally, when you hear music in Tomb Raider, that means that trouble is coming your way. Something bad is happening, and you're filled with a sense of danger, and all you can think to do is run and hope you make it to safety. You don't even know what you're running from yet, but the buildup of tension is done so well that fast-paced symphony music gets your adrenaline pumping and causes the aforementioned butt puckering.
You just pulled the tough end of a wishbone. Howdy.
Afternoon,
Left Larson sucking wind then, eh?
if that is the phrase.
Well, your little vacation riot's over now. Time to give back what you've hijacked off me.
Let's try the lunchbox.
The voice acting in the story elements is surprisingly well done. When you take into account that it was released in the same year as the original Resident Evil, which is notorious for it's so bad it's good voice acting, all you masters of unlocking, Tomb Raider's voice acting was spectacular for its time, and still holds up pretty well to this day. The music, composed by Nathan McCree and performed by an orchestra, can be both soothing and, depending on when it hits in the game, pulse-pounding. As stated, it's used sparingly in the game, leaving the player to mostly hear the sounds that Lara makes, and those of the surrounding environments. And with the hordes of baddies thrown your way, Core hasn't left Lara defenseless. Though the original Tomb Raider has the smallest arsenal of all the Tomb Raider games, there is still enough firepower provided to take on every enemy the game throws at you. Lara has her default pistols with infinite ammo to boot, automatic pistols, Uzis, and the mighty shotgun. The last three mentioned requiring you to collect ammo for throughout the game, oftentimes hidden away in secret areas, which are the reward for fully exploring levels. As the game progresses, the enemies get tougher, and your arsenal and your dodging abilities become more and more important. Lara will oftentimes find herself surrounded by enemies, and in order to have as little damage possible, the player is required to master what I call the Lara dance. Jump, dodge, roll, and keep moving while the enemies are swarming around you trying to kill you. When you do it right, you take little to no damage. But when you zig when you should have zagged, you'll take more damage than you should, forcing you to use a health pack, which you also collect along the way. Graphically speaking, even for its time, the Tomb Raider series was never considered a top-tier example of PS1 graphics. The frame rate generally moves at a consistent level, with some minor stuttering on occasion, but not enough to affect the gameplay. The textures are pretty pixelated, and Lara, whose character model in the first Tomb Raider is only made up of roughly 350 polygons, has some triangular features. If you're a snob about early 3D graphics, then this game isn't for you. Not because you can't deal with an ugly game, but because I can't deal with the annoying whining about those who put graphics first. It's design and gameplay that take precedent over visuals, and avoiding a game because it's ugly is not a good reason to avoid a game at all. There is also a lot of clipping issues in the game. However, this can actually be used to your advantage, allowing you to clip the camera through a door to see in a room you can't get to yet. Sometimes this can help you when you're trying to figure out where to go next. The Tomb Raider series didn't really come into its own graphically on the PS1 until Tomb Raider 3. Blocky, ugly textures, pop-in, clipping galore, and a number of glitches. Tomb Raider's visuals get the job done, but were never top tier on the PS1. When you take into account that Tomb Raider was in development for 3 years prior to its release, putting the start of its development in 1993, you start to realize exactly how revolutionary its level designs were. There was next to nothing for core design to draw inspiration from in the 3D realm of gaming. In fact, Tomb Raider was the standard bearer for what used to be dubbed the action-adventure genre of gaming. Despite the fact that Tomb Raider has only been given credit for cementing women characters as viable lead characters in games by the mainstream gaming press, Tomb Raider also had a profound effect on 3D gaming as we know it. Was it the most influential game in 3D gaming? No, but it definitely played a big part, and was one of the many games responsible for the 3D gaming revolution. 1996 was a landmark year for 3D gaming and gaming in general. A year that arguably helped shape the games we play today like no other year in gaming history. By the end of '96, the next generation of home consoles was in full swing with the release of the Nintendo 64, which took analog technology and shrunk it down into a thumbstick. id Software also dropped the bomb on PC gamers with a little game called Quake, that one could argue with its online functionality, use of a Voodoo 3D accelerator, the ancestor of modern graphics cards, making the source code easily available for the average gamer, which opened up the door for user modifications, like the original Team Fortress, and licensing of the game's engine to other developers, that Quake was probably the most influential game that year, and one of the most influential of all time. Tomb Raider, however, is just as worthy to be mentioned in the same sentence as both Quake and Mario 64, because it as well had a huge effect on gaming, regardless of the fact that the later backlash against the series has robbed it from its rightful place in gaming history. The bottom line on this one, the original Tomb Raider is still and will always be a classic, with its excellent mixture of action, exploration, and puzzle solving in sometimes wondrous and oftentimes tense environments. It may not get the credit it deserves, but it's one of those games that every gamer should at least give an honest try. The learning curve is high, and as it should, the game gets harder as it goes along, with the final levels being borderline insane with what's thrown at you. You'll die a lot, you'll struggle with the controls, but you may even come to appreciate the masterful design and the unique atmosphere. If you've never played it, you should, and don't wimp out and play Anniversary instead. After playing the first Tomb Raider for the last week, I'm almost half tempted to pop in Tomb Raider 2 and give that one a go. But I think I'll resist. Tomb Raider, since its release, has been ported to almost every platform under the sun. From the PS1 to the Saturn, the Mac, and the PC, which also had an expanded edition Tomb Raider Gold, to even the Nokia N-Gage, for all 5 people who ever bought one. You can also find it on the PlayStation Store and probably on one of the PC download services.
Ooh.